All right, let's get to the Houston Texans. Our preview for the 2023 Texans. This is all about just being a big boy NFL franchise again.
Yes.
And that's what it feels like.
Yes.
It almost feels like a dream. Think about what the Texans have been like for the last few years. And this is beyond Deshaun Watson. I'm not going to talk about. That's a whole different thing. This is stuff they did. These are choices they made organizationally. Yes. Remember the Jack Easterby era? Where they hired this guy who was the team chaplain for the Patriots and like a culture coach and essentially made him the main decision maker in their front office. That happened. That was a real thing that happened for multiple years in the NFL. Then they hired David Culley as a 1 year, just kind of lame duck head coach from the beginning to come in and be their guy. They fired him. They tried to hire Josh McCown to be their head coach. That didn't work out. So then they hired another lame duck guy that felt like he was hired to be fired in Lovie Smith. It's all over now. Those days are gone. They hired DeMeco Ryans. They got a guy who was in demand as a potential head coaching candidate to come in and be their guy. They drafted a quarterback with the second overall pick. They traded away next year's first round pick to go up and get Will Anderson with the third pick. We're here now.
Yeah.
This is real. Like they are in big flashing lights saying, pay attention to us again. And guess what? You got it.
Yep.
I'm paying attention to you again. I am ready to watch the Texans and see what you do this season. So the idea that there's even like a tinge of enthusiasm in my voice or in my head when I think or talk about this team, that's all you need to know about where they are now compared to where they've been for the last couple of years.
I was going to say, they're like a ghost ship, like a ship that you haven't heard from in 3 years that's been adrift at sea. And then now you're getting a signal from. You're getting the do. And it's like, well, I guess we got to go check this out. So, I mean, this was it's not like a total, like it really was, but it's like a smoldering ruins of a franchise. And it's like nice to kind of see some structure. It's like, okay, there's some stuff getting there. I think they just built a wall. I think they built a grocery store over there. Like it's kind of nice to see that. But the number one thing with this team is how the young guys look. That is what are our building blocks. I think we know a couple or have ideas of a couple, but maybe they can find some other ones on top of the quarterback they just drafted, on top of Will Anderson that they drafted in the top 5 as well. Just their other second-year guys, even a couple third-year guys. But it's what are our building blocks? And I think that's my number one question with them. But yeah, it's nice to get a signal from Houston again and then just kind of go like, okay, we can acknowledge you again and actually talk about some interesting things that you might be doing.
Biggest question about the offense that you have?
Well, how does CJ Stroud look? But really the number one thing is, how are any of these young pass catchers something? That's really my question. I want to know, because kind of haven't really had to pay attention, and Brandon Cooks is gone. So these guys are actually going to get that number one role. Nico Collins, John Mechie, Tank Dell, Xavier Hutchinson. That's a day 3 guys, but and these guys can any of them at least look like a number 2 in a real offense? Because then you can find your number 1 later down the road, maybe draft one high next year, but any of these guys actually something. And I'm
excited to see what Nico Collins looks like in this.
I know you like him, don't you?
He's got a lot of tools.
He does.
And they've just been such a disaster offensively over the last couple of years.
He could barely get the ball. Like they couldn't even get him the ball sometimes. It was frustrating.
I think he has something to him. And he was a 3rd-round pick and drafted into a horrendous situation, but a lot of physical ability.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to be a year where hopefully he can take a step forward even with a rookie quarterback, because he's now the guy. There's no one getting his way.
Right.
Kind of commanding targets within this offense. Even if John Mechie can do something in year 2 after missing all of last season, you got this version of Robert Woods. So It feels like Nico Collins is going to be the biggest threat in their passing game.
Yeah.
My biggest question, do they have enough around CJ Stroud to kind of put him in position to be functional as a rookie? Right. And I think the answer is yes.
I do too.
Titus Howard, their right tackle, broke his hand. He's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks, but could potentially be back early in the season. They signed George
It's not soft tissue, which is nice.
Yeah. So that hopefully he's just back and they'll be sooner rather than later. Again, we talk about Robert Woods. They signed Dalton Schultz on a 1-year deal to kind of give them a tight end. It's funny how Noah Brown is a guy they signed from the Cowboys. One of the reasons that they were intrigued with him is that he's kind of like Juwan Jennings from those San Francisco offenses, where it's just a dirty work guy, really brings like a level, like a mentality and an attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's going to drop in and kind of do that for them. And kind of brings me to conclusion. I think they do. I think they have enough guys there to kind of give CJ Stroud a shot. I'm just curious what the offense is going to look like.
Yeah.
You have this marriage between CJ Stroud and Bobby Slowick, their new offensive coordinator who comes from San Francisco. And Some of it, I assume, is going to look more traditional when we think about the bootleg stuff and some of the play actions. But the Niners over the last couple of years have gone away from that, as he's been their passing game coordinator over the last 2 seasons when a lot of those other guys have gotten hired away to head coaching jobs. I was shocked by this. 39 quarterbacks last season in the NFL attempted at least 150 passes.
Okay.
Jimmy and Brock ranked 26th and 27th in play action rate.
Okay.
They were below average.
That's not what you would guess.
And I think
you have to be locked top 10 every year.
So I think that the reason talking to people and trying to figure out, like, okay, like, what is the change there? As you get better weapons, play action limits the scope of your passing game.
Yes.
Okay. It confines you to often 1 or 2 guys out in routes, or maybe one side of the field. So when you have all these weapons, you should widen the scope of your passing game. And that's what we've seen happen in San Francisco over the last several seasons.
Get them on islands.
What you're doing is you're trying to manipulate space. That's if you have all these pass catchers, let's get all of them out in routes and let's widen the scope of what our passing game looks like. Get the ball in their hands and let them go to work. The Texans don't have that. Their guys maybe are more functional. So do you want to maybe narrow the scope again of your passing game and have it look a little bit more like Niners passing games in years past? But I don't think it's going to be totally a return to that version of the San Francisco offense that we've seen, because Bobby Slowick had a pretty big hand, I think, in shaping some of their evolution in the drop back game and in what that looks like. And that's why I'm kind of excited about him, because I think that the gains that the Niners have made and the evolution we've seen from their straight drop back passing game over the last few years, it's easy to get excited about. So him, I don't think he's just going to be a copy paste Shanahan play action playbook kind of guy. Because of the role he's had in that building over the last couple of seasons. I'm excited to watch it, because they've shown if we have a quarterback who can just be accurate and play point guard, we can really do a lot on offense. And what can CJ Stroud do better than any other aspect of his game is put the ball where he wants to put it. Correct. So I think that it could be a pretty cool marriage pretty early.
Yeah. And I also liked, I know you're kind of saying they don't do it as much, Stroud's ability to throw on the move. I always liked, because there
will be more of that than there has been in San Francisco. I would almost
that's what I was going to say too, is that with the 49ers and that play action stats so interesting. And I wish I could differentiate. And I think that I can on some websites is nakeds and play actions, like bootlegs and play actions. Cause they're just there's that difference. One's in the pocket, one's outside the pocket. And I think that's where the difference I've seen with the 49ers is so many defenses became so good at attacking those bootlegs. We've talked about this. They've been trained. The D end, you're going right at the quarterback, so you can't boot on you, it's kind of just matriculated throughout the league. And now I think I always say matriculate because of that old NFL films thing. And I know it's not even the right usage of it, but God, I just have that burned in my brain from when I was like 7 years old. But anyway, sorry. So that's where I maybe could see the differences, where it's kind of that tight end slicing across the formation to kick out the DN on the play action that we see more and more teams do. And then I think that's where Stroud's really good. He can come off that play action look and bump up. So I love those points that you're bringing up, because I don't know much about Bobby Slowick. I know his background, just looking at his resume and everything, but you never know until these guys get full control. They get final say. They get to get final cut on what their offense looks like. So hearing his ideas kind of being used in San Francisco is really cool to hear. I didn't know any of that. So I'm interested to see it all, because I think his baseline is going to be high. He seems well-versed. Bobby Slowick does. When I hear him talk, though, when I have heard him explain things. So I'm kind of like, I feel like his baseline is going to be high, because I think the run game will be diverse. I think they've learned enough from the last few years in the 49ers. And I think those passing concepts they use are modernized already. So I think that's where I have some optimism about what they're going to try to do, at least in year one.
And what's cool about the drop back game is that they've built the same sort of counters into the drop back passing game that they built into the way that the play action game and the running game fit together, and how it all kind of stems off of one another. Their drop back game looks like that. Every drop back concept has 2 or 3 counters off of it, where it looks the same until the last moment where it doesn't.
Same stem.
So
exactly. Yep. 5 yards. Or am I going in, out, or straight? Yeah, that's pretty hard to figure out.
And so that mindset of we're consistently finding little tweaks on all of this. Again, I don't think it's just going to be copy paste. So I think that's exciting. The other thing, you talk about him explaining stuff. I think that the experience they went through last year in San Francisco, where they had all new position coaches, essentially all new position coaches, him and Kyle Shanahan and Chris Foerster, their offensive line coach, were the only holdovers. So they had to teach the offense to everyone.
quarterback coach. I mean, Anthony Lynn. I mean, yeah,
Everything.
that's a lot.
Anthony
That's a
and
lot.
Anthony Lynn and Brian Greasy didn't come from that world.
No.
So all the protections are new to them. All the language is new to them. So Bobby Sloak having to be a part of that process last year, I think has put him in a very good position to be able to kind of do that same thing again with this Texans coaching staff. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point though.
So I think that's important to think about, because their offensive line coach came from the Colts. He's not from this world. Yeah. It's going to be kind of a mishmash of guys with backgrounds. But again, I think that experience last year puts them a little bit ahead of the curve. Yeah. And then the offensive line moves that they've made, talk about Tyus Howard. Tunsil's a superstar. Yep. Kenyon Green at left guard in year 2 as a first-round pick. Hopefully will be better. They drafted Juice Struggs.
He's another guy that had a better Green had a better last 6 weeks. The beginning of the year, I was like, oh,
rookie offensive lineman can be all over the place.
It's hard, man. It's hard.
And then they traded for Shaq Mason. So their line, I think, is in a good spot. Yep. All right. Biggest question about the defense.
Oh, what is my biggest question about the defense? Let me scroll down. Oh, okay. So I think it's really is how aggressive is it? How aggressive is this unit as far as blitzing? Because I think we've talked about this when we're talking about top 10 defenses, because everyone wants to listen to that show. Wait till you hear Robert Mays' number 10 pick. It's this Houston Texans team, which I think I had someone ask me about that. And I was like, I think listen to his explanation. Listen to Robert, what he says about it. Because I saw the tweet that you maybe got I don't know how I managed to get through that one, but
framing that as the top 10 defenses in the NFL and not the defenses I think will finish as the top 10 in DVOA. I think is part of the other thing. It's also you build those lists to have conversations.
Yes. Oh, I know. I know. That's what you got to understand. Some people sometimes it's like, I want to talk about a team, so I'm going to include them in here. So, but anyways, I just want to see how aggressive it is, because we talked about how we like their DB room is super interesting. And not only just interesting in a way like, oh, that player's decent, but just their skill sets like Jalen Petrie, Jimmy Ward, and Tavier Thomas is all of them are good blitzers. All of them can play in the slot. All of them can play in the back. Does DeMeco Ryans kind of move a new dial that we've seen maybe glimpses of, some game plans on third down? Does he lean into that more? Because now you don't have the Fred Warners of the world running from the line of scrimmage to cover guys and reading out plays right away. The Dre Greenlaws, Denzel Perryman couldn't be any more different than Fred Warner. Just look at their testing numbers. But if you want to know how they play, that's going to be a little bit of a difference. So how aggressive is that? How aggressive are you with Will Anderson as maybe your best pass rusher as a rookie? I just want to see what this new tweak is with DeMeco Ryans, because I think he adapted from what maybe even Robert Saleh did before him when he was in San Fran. So it shows me that, and also just his background as a player, what is his influence this year with the unit that he has right now? Because it's a unique skill set of a unit. Like they're very uniquely built. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, just interestingly built. It's kind of a Frankenstein's monster. So how do you weaponize that?
I'm excited about the potential development from the young secondary. Yeah. Corey Unlin, who is the secondary coach for the Niners over the last couple of years, he came with DeMeco Ryans to be the passing game coordinator for the Texans. And if you look at the development we've seen from Niners defensive backs, they've gotten the most out of everyone over the last couple seasons. Tayshaun Gibson was a guy they signed off the street before last year, and he played very well for them at safety. Hufanga was a 5th-round pick and I think was an all-pro last season. They signed Charvarius Ward as a big money free agent as a corner. He was really good for them in that role.
Lenore was a 5th rounder.
Lenore was a 5th rounder that had to be thrown into duty last year. So now you have the secondary that I think has some real pieces in it already. Yeah. And you have a coaching staff that I think could potentially get the most out of them. That's at the core of why I'm enthusiastic and optimistic about them. And the other thing is, and I guess we could talk about it now, my breakout guy for them is Derek Stingley.
Me too.
Because they had last season.
This is a cover 2 stat. This is a cover 2 stat.
The Houston Texans played cover 2 on 34% of their third down snaps last year. 34%. League average was 11%. So 3 times the league average.
God.
I hate when people do this, but I'm going to do it.
I love it.
You got a Ferrari.
Yes, you
out
do.
There at outside corner. That he is ultimate traits guy at that spot. What you've seen him do in college, especially as a freshman, and he's going to play cover 2. And we wondered about that coming into the season.
Yes, we did.
How does that make sense? Now you have a defense where even if it's still very zone heavy, when they're playing quarters, they'll let you get up there and just muscle shit out of people. Yeah. You look at the way they used Charvarius Ward last year. Derek Stingley is going to have a chance to challenge people this season.
Yep.
And can he take a big step? And I think that kind of speaks to the unit overall. And then if you get more from Will Anderson, you get a lot from Will Anderson. If he is a transformational player in year one, the way that we've seen with a Myles Garrett or Nick Bosa, players like that drafted in that range of the draft. If that all kind of comes together, I think that's when you can start building this case for why it's worth being excited about this defense.
And I said this before about Stingley, but it's like I had him graded the same as Sauce Gardner. And I mean that I thought both of them as top 10 corners, which is rare. Like a true real deal top 10 corner getting graded that way. Your point about if they run quarters, if they run cover 3, or just man, you're going to see Derek Stingley's gifts. This guy has the traits to be an elite lockdown corner. And he showed glimpses. He was when I was doing the awards during the season, the 30s awards, he was my second ranked guy in defensive player of the year for the first 2 votes until he got hurt, I think after week 9, after Sauce Gardner. And I just kept making jokes. I'm like, it's the year of the corner, like with them and Walden from the Seahawks. So I just think that it's a perfect encapsulation of what they'll do. I think him getting unlocked is going to be amazing. I think the rest of the DBs are interesting. We talked about the safeties and stuff, but the other corner spot, like Steven Nelson isn't bad. Like he's a solid starter. I want other teams to sign him. So I know we're kind of crossing between breakout player and the defense, but like just the other thing, how Will Anderson will get used, I think will be so much better in the pros than he was in college. It's almost like a college basketball player where you're like, they're playing for the long shot clock and they only shoot 8 shots a game. It's like, and then they get to the NBA with all this space. Watching Will Anderson go from being used as a 4-eye inside the tackle. And don't get me wrong, he still affected the game this way, but they slanted him a ton. They did all these things, but like on pass rushing downs, you didn't get to see him just pin his ears back and go. And so I can't wait to see Will Anderson get to do that in the NFL. And guess what he's awesome at? And I said this we did our edge rusher show with Deontay, is that he's awesome on twists and games. Will Anderson, like he is a weapon as the penetrator on defensive games. Guess who likes to do that? DeMeco Ryans. They love getting these guys going. So, that's going to be awesome. So, they're going from, last year, the 49ers had 181 quarterback hits and sacks combined, going to a Texans team that ranked 19th in that category. So going from 1st to 19th. So maybe doesn't have the toys that he had before, but I think Will Anderson's going to be interesting with this unit. That's why you draft him so high.
When I said that they were going to be top 10 in DVOA on that show, that is, I think that they have a chance to be above average, like in the top half of the league, and let's see what happens. And I think
we wanted to talk about them,
and I believe that. I believe they have a chance to be in the top half of the league based on all the things that we just laid out. It reminds me that the point you made about the basketball is very funny because it's almost like Will Anderson's like Paulo Banchero, where you just have this guy who it's all right in the college game. It's like, okay, but then you actually unleash him in the pro game and you just see what the skill set actually looks like. And not like he was obviously a good player at Duke, but like,
but
he didn't score 20 a game like he would in the NBA.
That's exactly it though. It's just, and that's the thing. He was still effective being used as like a role player would be used in the NFL. And now you get to see him highlighted. And that's where you see the bumps up with some of these guys. They get to actually get used where their gifts allow them to.
My X factor, probably between Will Anderson and Christian Harris. Christian Harris, who was a 3rd-round pick for them at linebacker last year, again, was hurt going into training camp, got on the field, head was swimming, you could see it. Is he somebody that with DeMeco Ryans there is kind of a stabilizing force, could take a big step forward in year 2?
Yeah. My X factor, and I didn't have a player. I just said the coaching staff.
Yeah, that's fair. It was hard for me to figure out one.
Me too, because they have a lot of guys, but it's not like, okay, this will make or break their season. It's more like, okay, is this guy going to be a building block? So I say with this team is a weird team of vets and intriguing young guys, and I don't mean weird in a bad way. They might not be good, but I want to see how they make it work, because I do think this is going to be a very competent coaching staff, as we talked about, Ryans and Slowick and the DB coach. I'm blanking on his name right now. I'm sorry. But thank you. But I feel like the arrow's pointing up just the feels of this, the vibes of this franchise, obviously, with who they take. But I just want to see how they make it work. So the coaching staff is my X factor.
The vibes is a very important thing to point out because the vibes are much better in Houston than they have been over the last few years.